Okay, if that's what's needed, I'll play along. Good. Well, this I have no idea, but yeah, magic. Well, all jokes aside, what we're presenting, we do know how to do, and we want to try and share with you how you can do it as well. And this is a good start of the presentation, actually, because we did struggle within our project and also thinking about today what to do when talking about our pedagogical approach, because we realize we're mostly talking to teachers. Most of the people in the project are experienced teachers, and they have, of course, even if the views are totally aligned, they have enough experience that it feels a bit silly telling people how to teach when they've been doing that and when you're asking them to actually create learning materials. So what we tried instead is to sort of try and just make sure that we're all on the same page and that we have a collective philosophy that's going to be seen throughout all our materials. And that's what we want to present to you here today, just so you know that if you adopt our materials, this is the place that they're coming from. But then at the same time, because we're trying to do as many things as possible, aware that we have a very different people in our audiences, we wanted to make today also something where through what we're going to be doing, we're giving you bits and pieces that you can use in your own teaching as well, when you're teaching your students who are going to become teachers, etc. So we're using bits and pieces of elements that we hope are going to be useful to you. So to start, we're going to do a small exercise that those of you who went through pedagogical courses, and certainly those who went through our training in UPSKILLS, will know already. So don't give the answer immediately if you know it, but it's also a good way to get us back into things right after coming from lunch. So this is an image that is often used in pedagogical courses to sort of break the ice at the beginning and represent what we actually do when we teach. So I'll give you a minute to take a look, and you're supposed to see what's in the picture. Those who know are smiling, which is great. And those who will find out will also be smiling in a similar fashion. Any ideas, those who've not seen this picture before? What is this? What can you see? Any guesses? What is it? What's in the picture? It's not a psychological test. It looks like it, maybe. Those of you who are online, you can also comment in the chat. Any ideas in the room? Everyone's baffled or afraid to try. There are no stupid answers. Any ideas? Online? No? Some face, mask, skull, map. Those are some common answers. So a map. Sometimes remember. Okay. Okay, well, it's actually a face, but not of a human, but of an animal. So this is a cow. So this is the head of a cow. You can see the nose here, the eye here and here. These are the ears. And this is the body of the cow. And we just had an aha moment, which is what we want to achieve in teaching and learning. It will take. You see it now? Yeah. So does everyone see it now in the room? Yeah? Sort of. So one eye, second eye, the nose, the nostrils, see the ears, and then the body of the cow. Okay. So the point of this image, and as Tanja said, it took her a while to remember, but she did remember. The point is that now when you look away and look back again, you cannot unsee the cow. And so every time I project this now, when I do these kinds of courses, I find it amazing that people can't see it still. And that's what happens when you learn things. You can, of course, forget them, but you never sort of unlearn what you did if it's good learning. So that's what it's supposed to do to you. It's supposed to change your perspective in a way that when you look at the same things again, you'll never see them in the same way as you did the first time you approached it. And that's sort of at the core of our philosophy behind the learning materials we're creating on the UPSKILLS. So in a nutshell, we want to make interactive content which guides the learner rather than teaches it, and it guides them to reflect on the tasks. So we start with problems, and then they get some instructions before the problems, they do the task, and then they reflect on what they did after that. Of course, we are producing a lot of things that look like the sort of classical, old-fashioned things that shouldn't be abandoned either. So we have also some, texts and PDFs and presentations and things like that. But the main sort of contribution that we hope to give here is these types of problems that you can give to students first before introducing any wide context and see what they can do with just the problem itself. When it comes to some other classical things that are used, that are certainly something that all of you who are teachers are familiar with. If we look at the learning taxonomies and we look at the different kinds of learning activities that we will also be producing. So we have, of course, different levels, from remembering as being sort of the basic, the beginning thing, and then we want to get them to creating in terms of what they do when they learn. And if we look at quizzes and tests with open-ended questions, problem-solving tasks, and simulation tasks are sort of the most complex ones, which we hope to achieve through the games, which Stavros mentioned before as well. What we decided in our UPSKILLS project is to aim here. So we're going to aim towards these sort of higher demands in terms of learning, so analyzing, evaluating, and creating, because these are the kind of skills that also go hand in hand with the mindset that we mentioned before, this kind of agile, adaptable mindset of being open to change. So we want to promote that kind of approach and thinking in our students. So we're going to aim towards those kinds of activities that promote this kind of learning. And as also discussed and mentioned before in the discussion of the previous session, we focus heavily, of course, on our learning outcomes, and we start from them. We define them to, of course, express the range of the things that will be achieved through the content that we are creating. So from the sort of minimal requirement to the maximum of those students who are really applied. And we start from designing these learning outcomes, which are aligned then, of course, with the learning content, which is designed having in mind that the student needs to sort of generate, elicit the verbs that are used in the learning outcomes, and the assessment tasks are, of course, formatted to, in fact, make sure we are testing that the learning content is leading towards the learning outcomes. And in that sense, this is something that can really help with the modularity of the pieces of content that we are creating, because you will have learning outcomes for these unit blocks, as we call them. And then you can see sort of if your students also need to achieve these things, you can take bits and pieces out of the content that we create, and you will know that this type of content will help you achieve this type of learning outcome, and you will have some assessment as well coupled with it that will help you in your teaching. Now, we tried to sort of get on board with this teaching philosophy through a training that we did for our UPSKILLS partners. And this is another thing that we are going to present you today, which is done and which can hopefully be useful to you too. So we had a training for our UPSKILLS learning content creation, and that then led to a period of the past several months where our partners have been creating learning content, and it's going to be finished hopefully this fall, winter. And they're creating these modular blocks of units in Moodle, and each sort of block of units has 3 to 6 ECTS, and you have also an indication of how many ECTS this full content can replace. But that means also, of course, that you can pick and choose an adequate number of activities depending on how much your course, how many ECTS your course has, and these activities are mix and match, as mentioned before. Now, when you go to our UPSKILLS Moodle, so it's hosted at the Faculty of Philology in Belgrade Moodle server. So it's upskills.phil.bg.ac.rs. This is what you can see. You can see some of the courses that have already been put there, and they are now being populated. And you can also see this training for UPSKILLS learning content creation. And I will just briefly show you this course because this is something that is the most, I think, useful for you. So when you log in, and we will tell you that you can also log in a minute too. So when you log in to this Moodle, and when you go to our training for UPSKILLS learning content creation, there you can see the contents of the training that we held last September. You can access our learning content creation guidelines, which is like a 40 or so with less page document that has everything about active and outcome-based learning, learning through theory and practice, and then different aspects, assigning ECTS, outlining piloting plans, etc. So we have all these things here for those of you who maybe either want to familiarize yourself with our approach or maybe not that familiar with these aspects of pedagogy and teaching. You have also more details on active learning in general, on learning outcomes in general, and assessing something that people usually just copy from previous generations of teachers. But if you want to dive a bit deeper into how to actually calculate this kind of workload, and I'm always shocked how few students and sometimes even teachers know what an ECTS means, and that's actually connected with the number of hours that a student is supposed to spend learning a certain topic. So there's that. There's also more information on gamifying learning and a demo of the gamifying aspect, the gamification that Stavros mentioned before. And here there are some also practical guides, so some things that are internal that won't be super useful for you, a guide that we had for our partners on how they are going to develop the materials, and other details on, again, writing learning outcomes, determining ECTS, assessment, feedback, and evaluation and piloting. There are also some demo lectures that you can take a look at related to machine learning, and then using Colabs to teach statistics. And there are some additional resources as well. And the whole course is also designed having in mind this kind of active learning approach. Of course, it was paired with the training that we did, but this is something that is available to you if you are interested. And yes, so everything is available on the upskills.phil.bg.ac.rs website. If you're interested in getting a username and password to access these materials, you can contact Nađa Soldatić, who's at the University of Belgrade Faculty of Philology. And Nađa has been a tremendous help in setting up the Moodle and managing all of this. So if you're interested in accessing our materials and being our early adopters, you can email Nađa and you will get a username and password. And so that's sort of the basics. I'll just summarize once Nađa finishes with her part as well. So these were sort of the basics of our philosophy that was behind our materials. These were some practical bits and pieces that I demonstrated here that I also showed you there. They are Moodle, and hopefully you can use them and reuse them and adapt them and sort of have this kind of approach be further developed. But another piece that we wanted to present to you today is some very practical skills that some of you may already have them, but hopefully it's good always to have a refresher. So Nađa Soldatić will now present you briefly how to actually deal with Moodle. Many of you maybe have experiences with it. But she will show you, so once all our materials are on Moodle, but also in general, how you can actually export and import and take these bits and pieces and put them into your own courses. So without further ado, and almost just in time, even with the delay, I'm going to hand over to Nađa.
Okay, do everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. Just to see if I can share. Yeah, Marco, I think you...
I will. Give me a second. Just having trouble finding you. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Just a second. Okay. Everybody see it? Yeah? Okay. So this is a quick introduction how to export and import your materials. You can do it with the whole course, with some topics on the Moodle course, and even only some activities, depends on you. But it's quite easy to do it, so it's going to be a brief presentation. I'll go to some courses that have materials, okay? So teachers can also do it. It's not only administrators, so you can try whenever you want on your course. On the setting button on the right side, upper right side, you go here and make a backup. And in this step, you have to choose which of the settings of your course do you want to backup, if you want to do that. So do you want comments, badges, calendar events, and stuff like that? I'll leave it by default now. If you want to copy everything, you just can jump to the final step right away. If not, you're gonna go to the next step. And then if you want some activities or topics, not the whole course, you can check or uncheck stuff that you want to be backed. Okay. This is a big one, of course. Then you go to the next. He will just check up once another what did you choose to backup and do the backupping. If the course is quite big like this one, you're gonna need some time. In my experience, the biggest courses needed 1 hour. So yeah, just don't be shocked if this happens. I hope that we won't have such problems. Okay, this is a huge course. I'll go to another one. Just a second. Okay. To show you. Okay, maybe this is a smaller one. Yeah, okay. So when the backup is finished, here is your course. You can restore it, put it somewhere directly into Moodle, and you can download it and put it in your course if you want, or download it and put it in some other Moodle. This is the version of 3.11. All the newer versions will be fine with this backup. Only if you have some very, very old version of Moodle, you could have some problems, but only with the new activities like H5P or stuff like that. But the basics, the PDFs, the PowerPoints and stuff like that can be backed and restored very easily. So with the general materials, you won't have any problems. This is some sort of zip file, so you can upload it to your course if you want other teachers to take it, or you can restore it. I'll show the both versions. First, we're gonna restore it. So I want to put it somewhere in Moodle, okay? He asked me now 3 steps. Do you want to restore it as a new course somewhere in the course, or restore in existing course? Now I'm putting somewhere, merge the backup course into the existing course. I'm gonna put it in the training here. Okay, so I'm putting all the materials from the previous course into an existing course. And again, he's asking me about the settings of the course. Do you want to include enrolled users? No. The blocks, the activities. So go just step by step. Next. Do you want to override the configuration of the existing course where I'm putting the materials? No, I'm not touching anything. I'm just putting the materials inside. Okay. Next. This is really a click next job, and perform restore, and that's it. Okay, so everything is inside. It's very easy to use. If you want just to take the backup file and put it somewhere, you're gonna go to the, where was it, machine learning. Yeah, it's here. I'm gonna download it on my computer and put it in the course here as a, just a second, it's here. This is the backup. So you can do this for every topic, for the whole course, and put a description. If you want to download and you use the materials and put it in your Moodle, it can be done like this. It's very easy, very quick. Just be careful with the steps when you are checking what do you want to back up. And the part of the restoration is very easy. Okay, any questions?
Thanks, Nađa. There don't seem to be questions, but I'm sure this is one of those things where it's great that this is being recorded, hopefully, Marco. Yeah. So I think this is something where people can view it step by step, and that's really super useful. And I can affirm that we talked already about, losing people who don't use Moodle. Nađa has been really instrumental in getting a lot of very old-fashioned people set in their ways to use Moodle at the Faculty of Philology. So she's really great at explaining things simply. But sort of this is a process that you can use for entire blocks, for individual activities, and we're presenting this to you today as well because we are thinking of how we can make this even more easy, whether we can already sort of back up some things and have ready links on Moodle with different types of packages, maybe with some materials that could be especially useful, so you don't have to go through all these procedures, so we can make shortcuts here. So we appreciate your feedback on that aspect as well. And I will just hopefully be able to share or not. No, it's not working again. Yeah, something's off with sharing. Apologies for that. This, no. It's not working again. I'll try one last time. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Okay. Anyway. So this was Nađa, and again, this screen. So now that you saw Nađa, you see she's super nice, and she will help you with your account if you like. And we hope you will be using our materials and giving us feedback as early adopters, perhaps even more useful for us at this point. So if you want a guest account, please do contact Nađa. And then just a sort of final announcement as we finish, again, just on time. This you've seen many times today and here again. So coming fall 2022, all these different kinds of courses. Some status already presented. We've decided to change them up a bit after the needs analysis. So for example, text processing and speech processing will be separate. And the way we deal with research management software is going to be a bit different than we initially envisioned, but these are the sort of main topics. We're creating mix and match blocks of units that are going to be on Moodle, that are going to be open access and easily integratable into different kinds of courses. And also, they're not going to be designed to be for self-study, but for those of you who do want to work individually on them, that's also going to be possible. And thank you very much for your attention and your patience. Thank you. And over to Tanja and Iulianna.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try to, oh yeah, cannot share content. Marco, will you make me presenter?
Yes, I did. Marco did.
Okay, let's try again.
Only one? Okay.
Sorry, just a second.
Okay, as Iulianna sets up, I have to go catch a train now, so I'll be joining from the train, hopefully in about half an hour. So thank you to everyone in the room and online, and see you hopefully from the train or otherwise another time. Yeah.
Okay, do you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, let's see slideshow. Okay. Okay, so Tanja and I will present you, will give an overview of other types of guidelines we have created in the project. Let me see, oh, yeah, my microphone is okay. So how to create a student's project and integrate it into your curricula, and an overview of other research reporting formats. So I will quickly give you a quick overview of the guidelines, and after which Tanja will share her experience with piloting these guidelines in an actual project. Okay, so the students project carry 1 to 3 ECTS. It is supposed to, it is an addition to the learning content we are creating in task 3.2. And the aim of such a project is to encourage the students to apply the acquired skills and techniques in an independent research project, while the lecturer provides no or very limited intermediate feedback. Such a project can be integrated as a mandatory project in an existing course for all students, or option. It can be an optional activity for those students who want additional credits, or as an independent full-fledged course for those students who have already acquired research-based skills in another program or related course. In UPSKILLS, we encourage our consortium partners who develop such research projects to showcase them on our UPSKILLS website. A draft version of the guidelines will be shared with you after the event. In a nutshell, the relevant sections that are interesting for you is how to create a project outline and the timeline. We provide a research report template with explanatory comments that you can fill in for your students, and a template for evaluation and grading. Additionally, we provide an overview of contemporary research reporting formats and a template for project description. Okay, so the first step is to define the learning outcomes based on the guidelines that Marco presented to you, the research-based guidelines. You can create the learning outcomes for such a project. If you decide to integrate such a project in your course, in an existing course, then you need to align those outcomes with the overall outcomes of your course. If it's an independent project, you can use the research-based guidelines as a starting point. When selecting the research reporting format for the final deliverable for the students, you have several options. You can combine a standard research report with presentation slides. You can either replace the research report completely with a blog post and a video recording, for example, or encourage the students to prepare a poster presentation or an infographic. Another format we came across during our desktop research is a mini website that students can sometimes use to report, to present their research findings. So regardless of this, the format that you're going to choose for the students, they will need to ask themselves, who is the target audience? Is it a specialized audience or a broad audience? Which elements from the research report would be most interesting to present to the audience? The methodology, the tools, the data set, and how to structure the delivery format, regardless the type of, if it is a text or video. They need to learn how to to structure the format in such a way that they convey the desired message. In section 5, you will find useful templates that you can just adjust and give them to the students. They can use them as references, and you will also find some examples of a blog post and for example, guidelines for how to create some nice slides. And then why is it useful to combine different research reporting formats? For example, by writing a blog post, the students get to engage with a wider research community and potential future employers. Students learn to distill complex research to different types of audiences. Good research reporting skills are required in the workplace. And those reading such blog posts or watching a video presentation encourage young people to take an interest in science. This is in a nutshell. When creating instructions for the students, we encourage you to provide guidance on the general steps in the research process. You can read the slides yourself. And something that we didn't have in the guidelines, an additional step at the end. It's also useful to advise the students how to archive the research outputs. produced during the project, so that they don't end up on your computer or somewhere in the cloud that nobody can access a year later. This is just a screenshot of the template, the research report template that Marco and Boban developed based on their experience, also inspired by the work of Tanja and Maya. So as you can see, you have a template, and then in green, we provide some suggestions, tips for the lecturer that you can use to fill in this template for your students. And then we try to include some basic RDM guidelines, how to archive the data sets produced during the project. And we provide a template, an evaluation form, for the evaluation and grading of such report that you can also adjust, of course, to other types of research reporting formats. And now, Tanja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Iulianna. What a great timing. So I will now focus on one part that is actually intended to be behind all these reporting possible formats. So the idea is that while working on the project, students should somehow have some means to be followed and guided. So we said that we want, with this project, we want to develop students' independence and we want to train them in that. But the thing is that they can really not to learn if they are just left on their own. So we need to have some kind of means in order to track them. This is why we're call this part tracking research project. And we would like to have, at the end of this project, some kind of an infrastructure, a piece of software, or just simply like a package of documents, which will be useful for tracking certain students' projects. So giving them enough instructions, but not too much. And also, this is something that should allow both students and teachers to have a constant good overview of the project. So being able to see the details, but the big picture also at the same time. So alternating between small detail, big picture, which is something that is that we know from experience is very important for research. And so another goal would be to ensure continuous progress and not do anything for 5 weeks and then do everything in one night just before the deadline. So this is also something probably we all have to work on. So the idea is that we have some kind of files where students would fill in information, let's say every week or any kind of agreed time step. And then what student fills in, it's commented by the lecturer or whoever leads the project. So I have prepared now. Next slide. Thanks, Juliana. Right. So this is a really small, very simplified example of visualization of how I think that this should go. So what we see here is a simplified structure of our research report. And so the idea is that when they start the project, students already see the whole structure so that they have an overview of what they have to provide in the end. And so we see this research report as actually the goal. So in the end of the project, students need to have this research report, and that's actually the result of the project. So and so the idea is that in the beginning, they already see the whole template and then try to fill in all the parts. So this is something that people find really strange, like how do I fill results? I don't know, I haven't done anything. But the idea is that you can fill in what you think will be the results. So that's about forward thinking, that's about planning, that's about an overview. And the whole point of tracking, how you advance, is that you see how what you thought in the beginning actually changed towards the end. Things can change, but it's important to track how they change. So that's actually a means of also tracking how you think. So what you see here is that in the beginning all is gray, so not filled, and students start filling, and then the teacher gives feedback. And then what I also wanted to suggest with these darker or lighter colors is that things don't have to be necessarily filled in this order, right? So the whole point is that students can, at the point where they work, for example, on data and methods, they still haven't looked very much into the literature. That's okay. Do something with data methods. In my experience, a lot of students like to start with that. And then, you fill up things. And so what I was giving as a feedback is actually at some point, okay, so now you need to fill a little bit the literature part. Yeah, so that's part of the guidance. And so the idea is that in the end, in the last time step, we have all the parts filled. And then we have also what is called, what we call the grade, where we apply the criteria that Iulianna mentioned. So I think we can move now to the next slide. Right? So what is the infrastructure like? This is the conceptual idea. So what we try to do, so we did one pre-pilot project. And so what we did, I just prepared sort of a package, a folder with 10 files, which were in Markdown format. So that is an editable format, easy to read in a browser. And so they said to the students, okay, so every week you send me one version. So for every new version, you actually copy what was in the previous version, and then you edit the parts that you want to edit. So one thing that was missing in our first version of this template was actually the field for the feedback. So we didn't have that because we didn't think of it. So I then started a new file where I kept the feedback. So it's a simple text file. I can show you later in case there is time. So I was just putting feedback by the date. So for every feedback, it was 2-3 sentences, sometimes longer. I would add, what I wanted the student to do in the next step. What I think, given what I see now, what should be done in the next step. So what I would like to do in the future is actually to have this tool as a web service somewhere where somebody can log in, get their package, fill in their things, and everything is sorted out by this server. But if we don't manage to have that, so the back-off version is that in any case, we can always work with some kind of a package of files. So when students start working on a project, they get a folder in which they can progressively fill in data. Last slide. Thank you. So I put together these notes, but I said already some of the observations while I was speaking. So one thing that we needed is that we added a feedback part. Then I noticed that there was a lot of moving between different, so a lot of my feedback was, this part doesn't go in that container. So this is not data, this is motivation. And then this is not motivation, this is a method. So I did that actually quite a lot, and I thought it's interesting experience. And then another thing that I wanted to point out is that we were focused mostly on research, while the project that we tried this on was actually a problem-solving project. And then I realized that we should have two versions. Although research and problem-solving are similar, there should be some subversions for problems. So the instructions in the template and stuff should be adapted to problem-solving rather than typical fundamental research. And finally, this did help speed up writing a lot, although we didn't manage to have the one step at a week. So in the end, there was some time when I heard nothing from the student, and then he just sent everything done and formatted. So this is still something to work on. But I think that as a first trial, it did work like 70% of what is expected, let's say like that. That's all for me.
Thank you, Tanja. So we are done. The next. Thank you for listening. Any questions are welcome in the chat.
Thanks, Iulianna.
Okay, Marco, do I need to make anybody else presenter?
Questions from the audience? Maybe someone wants to.
Present this again?
How do they do that from here? Or yeah, thanks. Let me do that. We are presenter again. Yeah. So do I get to show? No. I go here. I go here. No. 2:13 p.m. Do I need to download it? No, I can open it from here, right? No, yeah, I'm just up. Okay. And then I go back to WebEx and I share my screen. share. Is it okay? I did it. Cool. Same thing? Okay, share. Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, good.
Well, since you start, I'll let you.
Okay, no, I'll stand.
Okay.
I'll stand. So when we start, you need to, how do we launch the,
F5 or slideshow is what allows you to share,
yeah,
right?
there we are.
From here.
Okay,
Is it timed, this one, or is? Yeah, that's cool.
oh, yeah. We can have a little dance. But we're hiding actually the lesson. Exactly, that's what I thought. There we are. Okay, right.
I think you can advance with the.
Okay, good. So we are going to present one example of a content block. You heard this morning about the idea that the contents were actually blocks, kind of groups or whatever of. We've been debating about how to call that, but I think that the content block, the course block, is a good term for that. And we're just going to give you one example. That is the one that we created with Margherita. Based mainly on two courses that we piloted, one in the winter semester and one in the spring semester this year, and which enabled us to come up with a certain number of contents that would somehow support our main theme, which is theory-based learning. Mainly because we in Geneva University, we're linguists and we are mainly focusing on theoretical linguistics. So up to now, most of what we've been teaching is theory-oriented. And it was a very good time for us to think about, right, okay, we do theory-oriented teaching, but how does that kind of combine? How does that tie up with the goals that we have set up in UPSKILLS? And this is an attempt to try to implement the research and the skills-oriented kind of approach that we want to develop. Okay, first of all, context and goal. The very first thing I think we need to kind of decide together is what theory is, and we all know what theory is, so I've come up with a very simplified version of what we think a theory is. It's an abstraction over individual manifestations of, well, whatever, physical, psychical, intellectual, emotional, just choose your topic. You can have a theory about that we usually encounter in our daily lives. It's important because that also means that students have personal experience of many of these things without knowing it. Okay, so a theory will propose that whatever these manifestations are, they are governed by rules, and that's the first step that they need to encounter to integrate. And the role of the theory obviously is to determine what these rules are. So theory-based research or teaching will focus on the idea that there are underlying rules that need to be uncovered, and that this is how we will construct an abstract model of a system of some kind. In terms of linguistics, theoretical linguistics, theory about linguistics will obviously work on constructing models of human cognition, okay, and mostly related to knowledge of language. Human cognition is wider than that, but we will narrow down on what we call knowledge of language. And just a bit of history, because we come from Geneva, we were very happy to remind you of the fact that Saussure was the first scholar to propose that actually human language is an organized system. And it is also important in terms of teaching and in terms of our approach, because first of all, what Saussure did and the recognition that language is a system has enabled him, first of all, to look at human language not as a collection of words, of sentences that you learn by heart, but as a system in which the meaning of the elements of the system at any level arises from contrast, that is from comparison. very much, I would say, like, for example, colors become significant because they contrast with other colors. You know that blue is blue because there's red next to it, and these kind of things. And the second important point that Saussure also put forward is that the diversity of languages is not a random phenomenon. It's not just which just happen to have millions of languages. Il faut ajouter, I'm sorry, just reading in, well, I can read in English translation immediately right now, okay? One must add a faculty of association coordination, which manifests itself as soon as we're not facing isolated signs. It is this faculty which plays the major role in the organization of language as a system. Okay, the idea that you can associate, you can coordinate, that you can work on a system to create language. So linguistic theories have, there are multiple linguistic theories nowadays, but I think most of them have integrated the idea that language is a system. Okay, so why is this important for us? Because precisely we are working on research in linguistics that is trying to get our students to extract this notion of language as a system in terms of contents. So now that we know what a theory is that is elaborating on a system, the question is, why would we want to integrate theory into learning? We could just as well just deliver stuff and the students would be very happy to have acquired knowledge about Saussure, learning by heart quotations by Saussure and things like that. Well, remember that the goal of the UPSKILLS project is to make students in linguistics aware and, of course, to prepare them to the professional world in which people with linguistic skills should be integrated. Okay, so the market wants people which have linguistic skills. This is what was presented this morning. Now, obviously, many of the skills involve practical knowledge, hands-on training. Okay. So linguistic theory is very interesting. Okay, we've been doing that for a number of years, but it seems that employers don't really care about linguistic theory, about theory in general. Okay, what they want is people who can do things. So the question is, what's the point? Okay, what's the point of teaching theory? Well, our idea and what I would like to propose, and this is what the UPSKILLS project does, is that a theory-based approach will help students to do a certain number of things. First of all, learn, discuss, discover a problem. Okay, again, I'm using the same words, abstracting away from individual instances. We're not just looking at individual facts, we're abstracting away from them. And that's what linguistic theory will enable you to do. Build up a framework, or the ideal framework in which a problem of any kind will be solved. Generalize over individual cases, which might be very different, and you might think, oh, we have a problem here, but if you find the right kind of generalization, maybe you can find the right entry to the problem. View a given problem from various perspectives, and propose coherent solutions with, underlined again, the blue doesn't really show very well here, but predictions on what new instances might look like. So, when you have a theory, you also know what you will expect and what predictions should be. So all of these things are part of what UPSKILLS does, or what UPSKILLS will try to do, or will aim at doing, actually, at some point. And if you sum up, these skills are exactly what employers are looking for. Okay? So obviously, integrating theory into learning is not just the fun of wild academics. It's something that can be very useful, and it can have a lot of output. What are the kind of outcomes that we can have? First of all, we hope that students will be able to think beyond individual cases, as we said. Okay, that they are submitted to specific instances, and they will be able to think beyond that. They will be either have a framework, or they will be able to look for the right kind of framework to solve the kind of problem that they are required to solve. Okay, that is, they will need to be able to assess what kind of framework would be the most suitable for them. And they will be able to observe facts, construct hypotheses, work on solutions, which either align with the hypotheses or contradict them, pushing them to dig even deeper. Just to give you a small example. It's a baby example, it's a fake example, it's maybe a simplistic example, but I think it's one small example to tell you, to show you how it works. Imagine you're working on an analyzer and you're kind of unhappy because your analyzer does not perform well on emotion recognition. Okay, So you're looking at sentences and you're supposed to be able to assess the emotion value of these sentences. Typically, your analyzer seems to give similar status to, I will prepare a gastronomic meal for our president, and I should prepare a gastronomic meal for our president, in terms of intentions. Sentences very similar, they have an auxiliary, they have a certain number of things. Okay, you can postulate a hypothesis, which is, well, each situation has a different emotion intention. Context will do the job, which means that for each new occurrence, I will have to enter some kind of information which tells me, well, in this context, this is how we should interpret the sentence. Okay. Hypothesis 2, maybe we can look for some kind of generalization that will help us. Okay. And one such generalization is that these auxiliaries, these should and will belong to the class of auxiliaries, and maybe these auxiliaries are not exactly identical. They have maybe different emotion force. Linguistic theory tells you, well, actually, auxiliaries can be divided or should be divided into 2 types. The tense-like or aspectual-like auxiliaries, like will, and the modal auxiliaries. And the theory also tells you that modal auxiliaries convey actually the speaker's intentions and emotions. Solution: integrate the distinction between tense auxiliaries and modal auxiliaries to identify non-emotive versus emotive expressions. As I said, it's a baby example, but it's just one way of showing that actually knowing about theory and having a theory-based approach can help people solve problems in a rather simple and elegant way, depending on the situations. Okay, the course block. So what do we have in our course block as such? The purpose of the course block that we designed is a content and skills teaching, okay, based on theoretical approach to language variation. Now I send you back to what we saw at the beginning about language systems in which you have variation. The general content will encourage students to think about and to work on differences and similarities between languages. Okay, so it can be, students don't even need to have a lot of theoretical background to start with. They just have to be aware of the fact that there are differences between languages. The purpose of the course block is that after the completion of the unit, we expect students to be able to collect linguistic data, organize and annotate data, confront the data with a theory, compare analysis, maybe interact minimally with programming, and elaborate a report on their research activities. And this is where I leave the floor to Margherita, who will give you the details of what each of these, what the content block is formed of.
So content block is organized around different themes. These themes are not necessarily identified with single units. They are somehow mixed and spread throughout the units, but there are 4 main themes that we identified. So language variation, so diversity, what Genoveva was mentioning a minute ago. Some hands-on work on data collection. Introduction to the scientific research, so some basic concepts of the methodology that we need to know in order to independently conduct some research. And some theoretical notions about, for instance, in this case, the structure of a nominal phrase. We thought of organizing our block into 5 distinct units. Units here will not be presented as single class sessions. So imagine that one unit could cover, for instance, 2 different classes. And each unit will have a very slim content presented on, so the topics that are dealt with in that unit. So for instance, in unit 1 will be the idea that languages are diverse, but this diversity is not indefinite, and that there are some specific dimensions along which variation can operate. So the notion of a Chomskyan parameter, for instance, and this is the basic theoretical notions that we want to present in unit 1. And then many, and we will present some of them, activities will be associated to this content. So for instance, we developed a tool, so a game, to go back to what was presented this morning, which should promote this idea that human languages varies, but along very precise dimensions. The game is called Guess the Language, and it can be used in class to break the ice about this notion of language variation. So the game is inspired by the game that was developed in the late 70s, which probably many of you know. It's the game called Guess Who, in which there are two boards. Each player has a set of characters, and the characters are presented by their distinctive set of facial features. Do they have mustaches or a hat, long hair, white hair, female, male? Okay, that's not binary, but let's pretend it is. And the principle around which the game is structured is that it is only possible to ask yes, no question. So you only have binary options, and you can only ask questions about one feature, one facial trait at a time. And the game that we developed, that will be refined in the next months, is a game based on languages, in which each language is represented as a card, for instance, Chinese, Korean, Norwegian, Hindi. And each language is represented as a set of features that that language uses. Our student identified, I think, 18 features and 16 languages. And the game that you can play online against the computer, replicates the same dynamic as the one of the original game. So you have a panel to answer the question that the computer asks you. You have a panel that you can use to ask your question or to end your turn. You have your own mystery card. So in this case, I'm the player, I'm the Turkish language. And then you have, so this is the card that the computer needs to guess. And this is the set of cards that I need to use. So my board, the one that I will use to ask questions to the computer. So this game, for instance, can be introduced in class to start familiarize the students with the notion of language variation and of parameters, if you like. In Unit 2, we want to focus on data collection. So the students will learn how to search for the available data or maybe create new data by harvesting them from the literature, by interviewing human subjects, by using, in this case, WALS, that is the repository, the website that we use to extract most of the data that we use for the creation of the game Guess the Language. So in this case, the activity that, for instance, we could propose in Unit 2 is to create, so remember in Unit 1, maybe you introduced the idea that there is a game, and in Unit 2, you could propose the students to create their own language card. So in that case, they will have to find a language and then to find evidence, data that support whether that language has or does not have a certain feature among the ones that are listed. So again, the idea in Guess Who is that the students, and this table could be presented, for instance, in class. In Guess Who, you have a set of characters, Alex, Alfred, Maria, Paul, Max, etc. And each of them has its own characteristic set of realized features, which are of different classes: hairstyle, hair color, some types of facial attributes, facial hair, etc. And in Guess the Language, we created was created on a similar concept. So we have different classes of features. So features, for instance, that are related to the domain of the lexicon. And then we have more fundamentally syntactic type of features, for instance, on word order and everything in between, with also some elements about phonology or how the phonological system of the language works. And each language can be displayed to be unique because it corresponds to a very specific set of attested features. So by creating a language card, the student is confronted with this idea that languages are indeed comparable. You just need to find the appropriate set of features that describes them. In the third unit, we would like to dig a bit deeper in this idea of features and analyze the data, not just gather them. So the in-class activity that could be proposed to start to discuss the nature of features will be, for instance, to make a comparison between languages and faces, and I'll come back to that in a second. So in this unit, the topics that we want to discuss is whether what Genoveva mentioned earlier on, whether the data match the expectations, so match the features that we discussed, how the data fit or do not into this structure on this frame that we created, so the table, for instance, and what are the approaches if the data doesn't fit? Do we sweep it under the carpet, or do we need to modify our theory? Do we need to increase the feature? Do we need to modify the way that specific feature is, for instance, described? And for instance, in this case, an activity that could be proposed to the student to do at home is to create a new game feature. So in that case would be the reverse. You create a feature and then you compare the languages that are already presented in the table to see, and then again search for the data to see how that language places itself with respect to the new feature that has been introduced. So as for the activity that could be in class, could be done in class, the game could be used to prompt more sophisticated reflections on how linguistic features can be used in the game. So for instance, we could ask the student to think about languages and facial attributes. So what is the linguistic equivalent of a hat? Or what is the linguistic equivalent of having red hair, considering that there are certain features that a person has. For instance, I can be wearing my glasses, but now I don't wear them anymore, but my short hair is rather permanent as a feature. So what is the equivalent of that in linguistic terms? So making, for instance, a parallel with what we were discussing before, but having features that are more related to the lexicon, that is the part of the language that tends to vary quickly, and parts that are really structured, that form the identity, the DNA of that specific language. In Unit 4, we would like to go into one specific syntactic topic. We decided to deal with the structure of the nominal constituent because somehow it's a more enclosed type of topic. So introduce some theoretical approaches to nominal constituents, examine cross-linguistic specificities of the DPs, and then establishing comparison between these specificities. How can we account for this variation? And an activity that could be proposed in this case, for instance, is to ask students to find data concerning 5 or more languages and to ask them to make them comparable by annotating the data so that they can work on the notion of features, of, for instance, morphosyntactic features, and on the level of granularity. So depending on the task that we want to do, how deep we want to go into the discussion of features. So for instance, consider the English, German, Hungarian, Spanish examples presented here. I don't know why they're not aligned. So we could, this type of task can prompt a discussion, for instance, on the respective order of the head noun and a specific modifier, as for instance, in this case, the color attribute gray that can come before or after the noun, depending on the language, languages that mark case on a specific element, like for instance, Hungarian does, having a case specification marked only on the head noun, or whether you have a language like German where the case feature is spread on all the elements of that DP. Or elements that need to introduce propositionally certain types of objects, as in the case of for in Spanish, where you have the proposition that introduces the argument, or whether you need to have, for instance, a combination of determiners where you have both the demonstrative and the article in the same structure. So depending on the task you want to do, you need to go deeper or remain at a more superficial level on the features that you want to mark on a specific language. In Unit 5, ties us back with the presentation that we saw right before. So this would be a student project that can be presented as part of the course, or it could be given independently to students in the framework of a traditional syntactic course. So the students, what we asked our students to do was to run a survey on variation on a topic within the structure of the DP. So they had to design the survey, collect the data, interpret the data, report the outcome of their individual research project. And for instance, a group of our students decided to work on classifiers, so building on theories such as Benonius and Borel, and then having to establish what is the semantic level at which the insertion of a classifier becomes necessary. So we would have a comparison between a language such as Hungarian, where a noun such as flower, but if I understand correctly, a lot of nouns need, almost all nouns?
Not all, not all.
Many nouns, like there's a large
Some,
noun,
yeah.
more than French or more than Romance languages need a classifier. So you need to say a string of flower when you want to say a flower, compared to English, for instance, where you do not need to use a classifier for a noun such as flowers. Whereas in English, the level of granularity, so to say, where you need to have a classifier would be a noun such as rice. So a classic noun where you have small particles that you might disregard as individual units. So now quickly explaining how this type of course could be presented in a modular way in terms of ECTS. So the content of this course consists of 5 units. Units 1 to 4 can be proposed to the students in a sequence and form together a course of 4 credits. So if your universities adopt a 4-credit system based for their modules, you could directly import the 4 units. Unit 5, conversely, can be adopted as a standalone student project, and we calculate that the workload amounts to more or less 2 credits. So for instance, if you teach a syntactic course of 5 credits, you could think to have a traditional front lecture which amounts to a total of 3 credits, and then have them work for 2 extra credits on their own research project. Unit 5, however, can also be added to the course as a conclusive project, and then the entire course the entire block will become a course of 6 credits. However, you might also not want to really teach a course that you never taught before, but you're really interested in one of these small units as a standalone element that you want to insert in your own class. So what we thought is to create a unit 1, which is propedeutic, meaning that it functions as an independent introduction, which can be combined with any of the other units. So one could decide to get only the material associated to unit 1 and 2 and calculate that as 2 credits worth of work for the student. So the same could be done with unit 3 on data collection. So you could present unit 1 and unit 3, skipping unit 2, because unit 2, 3, and 4 are independent from one another. You could present the introduction, unit 1, and then continue with unit 4, skipping unit 2 and unit 3, because you can also work on the content of unit 4 as a standalone topic. So to recap the distribution of ECTS, with one course block in UPSKILLS, you could have different units, 1, 2, 3, 4, and present them to the students in a sequence and create a 4 credits course. Otherwise, if you just need to compensate, fill in a small part of your course, you can just select the first unit and one of the additional parts. You can also simply decide that you want to select your student project, like the student project that we propose for your class. And in that case, you need to calculate that that is worth 2 credits. Or otherwise, you can teach the entire, you can import the entire sequence and have an already made course worth 6 credits. So as for the learning outcomes, in this course, we expect the students to learn to identify and use suitable infrastructures and techniques to obtain the literature that would be covered in Unit 1 through 5, to identify and use suitable infrastructures and techniques for obtaining, sharing, and managing data, dealt with in Unit 2, 3, 4, and 5, to identify and use suitable infrastructures and technique to analyzing data, Unit 3, 4, 5, adapt a research design to the available research infrastructure, create suitable research design, perform research, and in general have an idea of how research design works. And those are in line with the UPSKILLS goals that were presented this morning. So thank you, and if you want to try to play the game, you can access the guess the language via this QR code, but mind that the mobile version is not available yet. So thank you.